Dear brothers in the advance guard, with deep love and appreciation, I offer the following. On a recent trip for the Behind Newsreel to New Orleans, I stood in the middle of Ground Zero of the Ninth Ward and paused to reflect on the devastation of this natural disaster. It was one of those moments of absolute bewilderment and sorrow. I hoped for some sort of epiphany, a moment of life-changing realization, but none came. I was numbed by the moment. It would take me the rest of the week to gain any understanding as to how to feel. It was, in fact, not just a natural disaster, but one of human devastation. No video I shot, I thought, could ever express the broader ramifications of this event. As I reflected back on those moments in my life that gave me hope about the vision of the revelation of Baha'u'llah to express itself in the world, I remembered the day that I stood on the 9th terrace on Mount Carmel during the inauguration and saw all the people of the world streaming up the steps to the shrine of the Bab. It's a rare moment when you get to witness this vision. These two images, one that held the possibility of a world of oneness and unity, and the other that reflected a world devoid of justice and equity, began to challenge parts of me that I have only visited as an exercise in the past. I thought I should be crying, but I was numb and could not. I recalled a letter to the community from the National Spiritual Assembly following Katrina, where it stated that the fault lines of race and poverty had been exposed by this event. I wanted them to explain what this meant in detail, but I realized, like so many things in my journey to understand, that the responsibility was mine alone, and that I would have to immerse myself in a deeper process. A process that would force me beyond my normal comfort zone. These fault lines were a mirror put to my face, and I had no choice but to look deeper into that mirror. Here are a few of my reflections on the events of Katrina and the fault lines. The great poet Langston Hughes explained to us long ago what would happen if we remained silent in his poem, A Dream Deferred. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? It exploded in the Ninth Ward in New Orleans on August 29th, 2005. Humanity was tested, and in our country failed to respond. Racism took over and spoke for the people of the United States through the voices of its government and formal institutions. And the public face of Katrina's pain is poor and black. One of the ironies during Katrina was a call in Congress to permanently repeal the estate tax paid by the wealthiest 2% of the population. This, a blatant example of the growing gap between rich and poor. 2 months later, the bill was passed. Americans have allowed the issues of race and poverty to go underground. Events like Katrina, OJ, Rodney King, bring to the surface the deep-seated effects of those maladies. As Dr. Joy DeGruy Leary said to me while visiting New Orleans, it's like an elephant in our living room that we refuse to acknowledge. This calamity has once again exposed these deep wounds and these fault lines and thrown in the salt of racism. These wounds burn through the flesh and soul of those most deeply impacted. They create scars of insecurity that will remain until these racist systems and attitudes are transformed at their core. During Katrina, U.S. institutions responded as they were constructed to respond. People were abandoned to their fate, while the police were sent to protect property that no longer held value. During this crisis, people were not lacking services. They were lacking the power to do anything about their circumstances. Racism not only breeds contempt for the victims of racism, but makes visible the privileges of those of us who are not black. As stated by the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, racism still exists in the U.S. because the majority of people allow it to continue, both by our silence and by our actions. We need to ask ourselves, what are we doing to undo racism in our communities and institutions? If we feel we do not know enough, then we need to educate ourselves. And that our government and social service systems have fostered so much dependency that some of us did not know how to function outside of these systems. The system's disability led people disabled to mobilize. Many generations of racial oppression manifested themselves in hopelessness, nothing to lose, and in acts of resistance to being dehumanized and made invisible. Desperate people do desperate things. A dream deferred. The message of violence is, you will see that I am still here, by any means necessary. I did what I have done in the past. I prayed and went back to the playbook. The playbook is Shoghi Effendi and the example of Abdu'l-Baha. I had brought with me my well-used and highlighted copy of Advent of Divine Justice. I'd studied this book all my life, and yet every word and long Shoghi Effendi sentence revealed new meaning to me with a new degree of urgency. It's clear to me that our building this new world order, which is the process of building a society and community that is based on justice and equity, is, in the end, humanity's only salvation. As Shoghi Effendi states, let neither think that they can wait confidently for the solution of this problem, or wait for favorable circumstances created by agencies that stand outside the orbit of their faith. Nor can we wait for future generations. We are the advance guard. Freedom from racial prejudice, in any of its forms, should at such times as this, when an increasingly large section of the human race is falling victim to its devastating ferocity, be adopted as the watchword of the entire body of the American believers. In whichever state they reside, in whichever circles they move, whatever their age, traditions, tastes, and habits, it should be consistently demonstrated in every phase of their activity and life, whether in the Baha'i community or outside it, in public or in private, formally as well as informally, individually as well as in their official capacity as organized groups, committees, and institutions. Shoghi Effendi then offers this blueprint for personal action and transformation. Let the white make a supreme effort in their resolve to contribute their share to the solution of this problem, to abandon once and for all their unusually inherent and at times subconscious sense of superiority, to correct their tendency towards revealing a patronizing attitude towards the members of the other race, to persuade them through their intimate, spontaneous, and informal association with them of the genuineness of their friendship and the sincerity of their intentions, and to master their impatience for any lack of responsiveness on the part of a people who have received for so long a period such grievous and slow-healing wounds. Let neither think that the solution of so vast a problem is a matter that exclusively concerns the other. Let neither think that such a problem can either easily or immediately be resolved. Let neither think that they can wait confidently for the solution of this problem until the initiative has been taken and the favorable circumstances created by agencies that stand outside the orbit of their faith. Let neither think that anything short of genuine love, extreme patience, true humility, consummate tact, sound initiative, mature wisdom, and deliberate, persistent, prayerful effort can succeed in blotting out the stain which this patent evil has left on the fair name of their community. Let them rather believe and be firmly convinced that on their mutual understanding, their amity, and sustained cooperation must depend more than on any other force or organization operating outside the circle of their faith. The deflection of that dangerous course so greatly feared by Abdu'l-Baha, and the materialization of the hopes he cherished for their joint contribution to the fulfillment of that country's glorious destiny. I recalled with Joy Leary the movie A Time to Kill. Joy recalled that her most memorable scene was the final courtroom summation where Matthew McConaughey had the jury imagine the details of the little girl who had been raped, tortured, and killed, and then shocked the all-white jury by asking them to imagine that the girl was a white child. My response to Joy was that that scene was set up by a scene earlier in the movie where Samuel L. Jackson told his lawyer, Matthew McConaughey, that the reason he chose him to defend him was because he was one of them, a white male, and that only a white male could make the case for his defense. The lawyer was on a journey, from being a liberal white male to having to take stock, to being really changed beyond liberal views alone. In the final scene, the lawyer and his family joined Jackson and his family at a cookout, beginning a relationship less formal and of intimacy. In Advent, Shoghi Effendi points out Abdu'l-Baha's example and admonition. Let them remember his courage, his genuine love, his informal and indiscriminating fellowship, his contempt for and impatience of criticism, tempered by his tact and wisdom. The stories of Abdu'l-Baha's example while in our midst are our gospel, and in one sense, he is the pupil of the eye and the light of truth. Let them revise and perpetuate the memory of those unforgettable and historic episodes and occasions on which he so strikingly demonstrated his keen sense of justice, his spontaneity, his spontaneous sympathy for the downtrodden, his ever-abiding sense of the oneness of the human race, his overflowing love for its members, and his displeasure with those who dared to flout his wishes, to deride his methods, to challenge his principles, or to nullify his acts. Let us in this generation not only revive and perpetuate the memory of those unforgettable and historic episodes, but begin to create a body of stories that by our example will demonstrate to the world at large the universality and the representative character of the faith of Baha'u'llah. On the final day of my trip to New Orleans, I sat on a landing outside my hotel room and said my final prayers before returning to the comfort and safety of my home, and reflected once more. This is when it hit me that I had to encourage my white male brothers to redouble their efforts in this area. I realize that those who may hear these thoughts may already be in the choir and already realize our specialized responsibility as white men in this most vital and challenging issue. And so I assume that commitment and share with you these final thoughts. I sat there and said to myself that I had to redouble my own commitment and pursue with greater intensity those intimate relationships that have always cast the light of truth before me. I also know that I will never be a great speaker or will likely write a book or a screenplay on this subject. However, I know I must act, each according to his or her own capacity, experience, opportunities, to the common task of fulfilling the instructions and realizing the hopes and following the example of Abdu'l-Baha. This is when I cried. In a letter from a Birmingham jail, Dr. Martin Luther King said, "More and more I feel that the people of ill will have used time much more effectively than have the people of goodwill. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Human progress never rolls on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to be co-workers with God, and without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation. We must use time creatively, in the knowledge that the time is always ripe to do right. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy and transform our pending elegy into a creative psalm of brotherhood. Now is the time to lift our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to a solid rock of human dignity." And finally, Shoghi Effendi says, "How great, therefore, how staggering the responsibility that must weigh upon the present generation to weed out, by every means in their power, those faults, habits, and tendencies which they have inherited from their own nation, and to cultivate patiently and prayerfully those distinctive qualities and characteristics that are so indispensable to their effective participation in the great redemptive work. Let them focus their attention for the present on their own selves, their own individual needs, their own personal deficiencies and weaknesses, ever mindful that every intensification of effort on their part will better equip them for the time when they will be called upon to eradicate in their turn such evil tendencies from the lives and the hearts of the entire body of their fellow citizens."
This song is dedicated to the city of New Orleans, from the whole world. Let's go. I feel your heartbeat, I see your tears fall, I see your hands go up now, you've given up on it all. I see your head go down, I know you've lost hope. Your walls keep on coming down, and you can't take no more. Every road you travel seems like your journey's in. Your life's an endless battle that you can't seem to win. Well, I say, stand up and claim what's yours. Leave those troubles behind and don't you look back no more. Let your light shine on the world. Let your light shine. Let your light shine on the world. Let your light shine. Let your light shine. Yeah. Let your light shine on the world. Oh yeah. Let your light shine. Shine. Yeah. Let your light shine. Woo. Gotta let your light shine. Hey, on the world. Let your light shine. Shine. Let your light shine. Let your light shine on the world. Let your light shine. Yeah. Let your light shine. What's the situation? Let your light shine on the world. Let your light shine. 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 Shine on the world. Shine. Let your light shine. Shine. Let your light shine. Who you are? Let your light shine. Shine on the world. Let your light shine. Nothing's going through. Let your light shine. Let your light shine. Shine on the world. Shine. Let your light shine. Let your light shine. Shine. Let your light shine. No matter the weather on the world. Shine. Let your shine together. Shine. Let your light shine. Come on. Clap.
The Creator has a working plan. Peace and happiness for every man. The Creator has a working plan. Peace and happiness for every man. The Creator has a master plan. Peace and happiness for every man. The Creator has a master plan. Peace and happiness for every man. The Creator makes but one demand. Peace and happiness through all the land. The Creator makes but one demand. Happiness through all